I always think it's alcohol, drugs, and gambling are the three addictions that I see most in our community.
Yeah.
Like, you know, from being part of that community. What do you think spurs that?
With medication, you can deal with the tangible. How do you deal with the things that are not tangible?
Hello, so Poonam Sandhu, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All right, just, you know, hanging in there. So for people that don't know, Poonam's a mental health nurse, and you've recently started, is it a blog? What would you call it? Mental Wealth Matters?
I'm in the process of starting a blog, but I have kind of launched myself as Mental Wealth Matters, just to put a name on what I'm doing and what I've been doing for the last, oh my God, I'm going to reference my age now, but yeah, coming up to 20 years.
So
Yeah.
you've been working with mental health as a mental health nurse for nearly 20 years then?
So officially about 15 years.
15 years.
But prior to that I was kind of training up and getting into nursing and doing all kinds of different things that took me to my areas of expertise that I am in now, yeah.
What made you actually go into mental health in the first place as a career?
Do you know, it's really funny because actually I was tricked. So I was that teenager that gave my parents the hard time. Let's not forget, you know, you grow up in that period, your parents are quite, well, my parents were quite strict.
Yeah.
And I rebelled against that. And I'm sure I'm not the only Asian person in this seat that's probably ever going to say that. But yeah, I really rebelled. And my mum sent me off to get a work interview. And I was like, right, I'm really going to cock this up. Not knowing it's her proper best mate.
Yeah.
Got into working as a care home. And that just turned my life around. You know, working in a care home, you're literally starting from the bottom up in every sense of the word. You know, and so that's how I got into nursing. How I got into mental health was working with women who were fleeing domestic violence. And that really blew my mind. So that took me down the path of mental health, really, and I just felt that I had a gift for talking, which a lot of people will echo. So I wanted to use that to help others. You know,
Right.
I just yeah, that's how I got into mental health, through my mum's trickery.
Hey, well, shout outs to mum.
Shout out to the mum, yeah, absolutely. Got me into nursing, yeah.
And with the blog, so what made you start the blog? I know it's like a format for you to share your experience.
It's in the process of me trying to kind of create and start the blog. Really, to get people to start thinking about mental wealth. We talk about wealth in terms of money, you know, especially Asians. Let's face it, the cars, the house, you know, all of that. We see that as status. And we do acknowledge health somewhat. And it's really easy. Oh, you know, like got a broken leg, or, you know, yeah, my arm's hurting. All of that we acknowledge. But how do we accumulate our mental wealth? For me, that's massive, you know. And I don't think we do it. And as a community, I think I've found our community especially hard to target. I got to a place in my career where I was like, you know what, I'm not even going there. But now I do feel differently, and I kind of want to really just put that message out there about, accumulating your mental wealth, but understanding what self-care is, understanding what self-love is. And that's such a cliche thing about self-love, you know, how to love yourself. But if we don't do that, all the things that we predispose to, diabetes, heart disease, you know, all those things, they're just going to be exacerbated because we can't look after ourselves, like, mentally.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that. But I also think the parallel that you drew there between physical health and mental health. Do you remember at 10, 15 years ago when, like, diabetes and heart disease and stuff were ignored? Nobody gave a shit about them. Whereas now, through work, outreach programs, etc. Because I remember when we used to go to the Gurdwara, I remember doctors, GPs and stuff used to come in, they'd do talks on diabetes and stuff.
Yeah.
I think now there's like a little shift where people are starting, in our community, are starting to think, oh, okay, maybe mental health is a thing, let's learn about it. So I think you're probably doing this at a great time, actually, to like add to that.
Yeah. I mean, my husband makes me laugh because he's been like, he says it to me, honestly, at least once a week. He's like, you've been going on about this for the last 10 years. And I'm like, we didn't even meet 10 years ago. Like, but you know what I mean? But you're absolutely right, because it's such a big thing. You know, you can have an operation. You can manage yourself with medication. You can deal with the tangible. How do you deal with the things that are not tangible? It's so, you know, so you're right. You know, it is a good time. I guess I still have my little resentment in the back of my mind that, like, come on, guys, like, you know, we really should have started addressing this a long time ago. But we are here today, and that's what we need to do. You know, and we need to educate the elders, the new generation, and the coming generations, and how to kind of work with this, you know?
Yeah, I'm with it. And one of your specialisms is addiction.
Yes, absolutely.
Quite an apt topic for our communities, I think, in the South Asian community.
Yeah.
What types of addiction have you seen?
So
personally?
Predominantly...
Not personally, but...
Personally.
Like,
well, personally,
what are you addicted to?
We can talk about it as a whole different show. But, oh, goodness. So predominantly alcohol, drugs, you know, you've got gambling, you've got sex addiction, love addiction.
Love addiction?
Yeah, love addiction. You know...
Wait, you can't gloss over that. What's love addiction?
Well, sex and love addiction really is all to do with intimacy.
Right.
And this is going to, you know, excuse the pun, but it's filling the hole. You know? sorry guys. But it's that void, you know, and trying to fill that void. And the same thing that somebody might do or get that void filled with alcohol or with drugs. It's reaching an oblivion. Right. Which takes you away ultimately from yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say.
Obviously, alcohol, I think we've spoken about it a lot on this show. Why do you think... I always think it's alcohol, drugs, and gambling are the three addictions that I see most in our community. Yeah. Like, you know, from being part of that community. What do you think spurs that?
I don't. So for me personally, like, in all the years I've worked in addiction, I don't think you can say that addiction will discriminate, you know, against who it's going to choose. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't matter what color, religion, you know, your sexual preference. It's going to pick anybody. Why our community, you know, why we need to look at our community around it is because we brush it all under the carpet. You know, there's amazing things about the South Asian community, but there's actually some things that keep us really unhealthy and really toxic. And that is one of the things. Push it under the carpet. Let's put some prayers on it. Let's get this person married off. You know, this person's possessed. Take them to a priest and get this demon out of them. Right. Come on, let's talk about that stuff.
Have you come across cases like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been very fortunate and very privileged in my working life to come across amazing people. So I don't want to be like demonizing anyone who's got an addiction, but you will see people, and I've experienced a lot of people from our communities, whoever comes into treatment, and who've been really ill from alcohol or drugs. You know, they've nearly died or killed somebody else in that. And I find the families can be a real problem. You know, they can be don't get me wrong, I don't want to dismiss how much the families go through, because the families go through hell and back, right? With their addicted person in the family. But they don't know how to support them. Yeah. Why don't they know how to support them? Do they reach out to services? Of course not, because then everybody will know. Oh, no, they're not in treatment. They've just gone on holiday for 3 months. Why are we doing that?
That weird concept of communal shame, even though everybody's going through something similar. You know, I don't know one family in our community that hasn't, especially alcohol, that hasn't suffered from some form of alcohol addiction.
And when you think of that, so if we were to sit here and have a frank discussion about who we think may have an addiction in our family or our friend circle, if we were to have that discussion truthfully, right, how much of that discussion is also going to be about, oh, okay, and they spoke about it and they got treatment and yeah, you know, like they've got enough support. 0%, 1%. But then we also have to look at ourselves. You know, I'm going to put my hands up here and I'm going to say that I've had depression in my life in recent years. I was so embarrassed to talk about it. I felt shame to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, so there is something that's a cultural norm within us that's built, and we have to kind of break that. That I think is really, that's actually quite toxic to all of us.
Yeah, I think it requires an almost paradigm shift, I think, in our community to almost accept that, okay, people have flaws.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like being genetically predisposed to like a diabetes or something.
Totally.
Like, you know, the aunties at the Gurdwara, they're always like, oh, mere ko le diabetes or sugar. But nobody would be there being like, look, man, I've been like fucking feeling down or some shit.
I'm depressed.
I'm addicted to something.
Doctors told me, you know, I'm drinking, I'm really struggling, or, you know, I'm taking lots of pills that the doctors said. I mean, what about prescription pills? They're huge. People are addicted to it, you know. That's got its own thing, you know. But yeah, you're so right. We're so quick to talk about the physical stuff because that's socially accepted.
Yeah.
But the minute you bring in something else, it's you know, and I'm really passionate about it because, you know, to the detriment of perhaps my role even within my own family, I'm a bit of the black sheep because I talk and then if I almost find sometimes you almost have to come away and retreat a little bit because not everyone's ready to hear the truth, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Have you faced a lot of backlash? Just maybe not backlash, maybe that's the wrong word, but have you faced a lot of like, backlash from communities, families and stuff in the work that you do?
In the work, I suppose maybe a little bit with the clients, you know, as I was saying, you know, I remember one client's mum was kind of asking if I was married. And I'm like thinking, so you want to think about me for your son while he's having alcohol treatment? Like, really? Like, you think that's going to solve his problem? Oh, I know. Let's get him married to this person who deals with alcoholism. And, you know, so in terms of clients, families, not so much a backlash, but not a lack of understanding. That would probably be the best word, actually.
Lack of understanding.
Just a lack of understanding all round. I know even my mum, like years ago, she was like, well, why can't they just stop? Because that's not what they do.
Yeah.
And, I know when I had my daughter, and that was when my postnatal depression set in, I again, as I said, I was really scared to tell anybody how I was feeling. I'm a mental health nurse, I've been doing this my whole life, but no, it comes to me, shut down. But I remember the things that I would hear people say, like, you know, well, in my day, you know, we would just get on with it. Oh, in my day, we didn't have any of this stuff, and you know, we didn't have it as easy as it, and you know, you just recoil even more, you know. So I think what's really important as well, I guess, is putting yourself around the right people that have a really good understanding. And even if they don't have a good understanding, but they promote your self-care. So they're not going to be the one to be like saying, oh, you know, like, you've got a problem, don't worry about it, you know, or they'll be like, you've got a problem, how can I help? Can I help? You know, do you need to talk to someone about it?
It's like having like a sport network is really important.
Yeah.
Whether that's professional, social, or whatever. It's
so important to have a good support network, you know, because I think when you don't have a support network in place for whatever you're going through, you know, that's why they say it's really important to have meaningful relationships. Because when you don't have that in place, I think it can be really lonely, you know, and then it just feeds that, can't talk to anyone about it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to put you on the spot here, but were you about to sneeze?
I was about to sneeze, yeah.
He's like, shit, she put me on the spot.
I was like, go on.
What's that about?
Put me on the spot, let's see what you got.
No, but have you ever been in a position in your life where you've been really low and you've not reached out?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but I recently took 6 weeks off work. One of my main problems, I think one of the reasons that I sort of spiraled was because I wasn't talking to people. We did like an episode on it a few episodes ago where I sort of detailed all of that out. It was shame.
This is the breakup, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it was almost like shame. Like, you know, like I've got this persona that, like, I think in my friend group, everybody's like, you know, I sort people's problems out. You know, I'm not supposed to have problems in my family. Same thing. That's how I felt, and I think that's like, you just get caught up in it, and you're just like, nah, I don't. And then you keep ignoring it. Your behaviour starts spiraling. Shit gets worse. And I think one of the biggest learns that I think I had throughout that whole thing was, oh no, take care of that stuff. So, like what you're saying, like self-care, being in touch with your own emotions, I think is super important in order to make sure A, you achieve your goals, and B, also you're in a position where you're enjoying your own life.
Yeah.
Because I look back on it and I think there was about 4 or 5 month period where if I'd done something almost straight away, that I could have back, and I could be further along and all that sort of stuff. I mentioned earlier to a couple of my friends as well, I think masculinity was a thing. It's like, it's not really seen as a masculine thing to like share your feelings, confront them. Whereas I think that conversation needs to change.
Absolutely.
I think that there can be nothing more masculine than taking care of your problems and making sure they don't affect the people around you.
Yeah.
It's like, what could be more masculine than that?
Yeah.
And that's probably a flaw in our cultures, I think, South Asian cultures.
You know, like, so I'm big on traumas, right? Everyone talks about trauma, and I feel that we have to really acknowledge our traumas. So it's really interesting that you say that, because I think we have like intergenerational trauma where we've inherited certain things. So the shame you're talking about is not actually your shame. That is a toxic shame that you've inherited. If I talk about my feelings, you know, I'm going to be less than. Now, I'm making assumptions here about your family, but, you know, perhaps that's something that your dad would have felt and something that his dad would have felt. So we have to look at our traumas. And, you know, I'm sorry to hear that you went through that, but it's good that you went through that, because you're here today, and it, you know, it's the cliche, isn't it? You know, I'm not going to say it makes you stronger. I'm not going to say that, but I am going to say it builds who you are. But like I said about trauma, like I heard this years ago and I loved it, but I didn't know why I loved it. So look back, but don't stare. You know, and so there are things in our childhood that we really have to address. I think you said in your podcast that you didn't have the coping skills.
Yes.
Now, that's really important to understand. Well, how comes I didn't have the coping skills? And I think about that. You know, we almost have to have a toolkit. And where do we get a toolkit from? Who teaches us a toolkit? Who gives us that toolkit? So not only do we have a toolkit, but we've also got some seriously dangerous shit in that toolkit that's fucked us up before. You know, like, now I love my parents, you know, and I'm grateful to be where I am because of the hardships that my parents went through, you know, but I acknowledge there are also traumas from that, you know, with certain things that occurred, you know, whether it's them getting stressed from having to work to put food on our table. You don't understand that as a child, you know, or for example, I'm just thinking like, oh my God, this is the post-pregnancy going into, I don't know what I'm talking about. No, but whatever it is, it's manifested in a way that may have created trauma. You know, I didn't just become a rebellious teenager for no reason. Like, I know that my parents were really cautious. You know, that translates for me as a child as really controlling. Yeah. So how did that impact on me as an adult? I had to really acknowledge that. And so, coming back to the toolkit, and when you go through something in life, I think we have to acknowledge some of those traumas that become the architecture of how we function. Yeah. I
think. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But you mentioned intergenerational trauma. Yeah. And the more you kind of start to think about it, the more you kind of realize, I'm willing to bet our experiences are the same or very, very similar as let's say African immigrants
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Spanish
yeah,
immigrants,
yeah,
now Eastern European immigrants,
yeah,
because I think the culture within immigrant communities becomes like the first generation comes over and their only goal is to establish themselves
yeah.
and retain their culture.
Yeah.
But you're in a different culture
Totally,
here
yeah.
where it's like, you know, you're trying to maintain two cultures as a second generation person. You're trying to maintain two cultures. A lot of the times, your parents aren't around because of shift work and stuff. Like my dad worked at one point. He worked two jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, he worked two jobs,
A hustle.
and both were nights. So it's like almost, even though like we lived with my dad, lived with my mum.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it was like my mum raised us.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's a single parent household, isn't it?
And so that would have had its own impact.
Yeah.
Right? And we have to acknowledge, how does that impact later on down the line? How does that impact on our relationships? How does that impact on our relationships with our work? Colleagues, could be colleagues. Something might trigger us off. You know, sometimes we don't know what where we're working from. That might impact on your relationship massively with yourself. Like, where in that would you have learned how to take care of yourself? Because in some way you would have probably been really mindful about taking care of your mum. So when you translate that into a relationship, it's like, okay, so am I the caretaker now of others?
Yeah.
You know, and then if I'm the caretaker of others, damn, that's going to have an impact somewhere along the line, and that's going to really impact on me. And some people get that, and some people don't.
Yeah.
And so self-awareness for me is like power, is like knowledge. And I don't mean for anybody else. I mean for me, and like, you know, to have. I mean, I imagine that you ended up having some therapy or some kind of counselling around that.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you learn in that, that's your power, that's your knowledge. Obviously, maybe not all of it, but whatever really worked for you.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Like so I actually have a degree in psychology, so I kind of know like a few bits and pieces. But it wasn't until like literally an hour a week you set aside, you talk through somebody, you talk it through with somebody, then you start realizing shit. You're like, oh, okay, cool. This is X has affected Y, Y has become Z, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have an hour for the first time in my life. It was the first time ever. An hour a week where you sit, you think about how you can actually be better.
Yeah.
How can you cope? What can you do? And in a weird way, it was almost like it was, you know, one of these like really inspirational TED Talks.
Yeah.
It almost became that, where you were like, oh yeah, shit, I do have power over this, and this is what I can do to like be better as an individual.
And be the best you can be, right? Be the amazing person that you are.
As cheesy and as like cringe as it sounds, yes.
Sorry, I'm so full of cliches, but I am that person that doesn't say them without believing it.
I'm totally with you.
You know, but so do you think that you would be saying that had you not had severe depression and had kind of the treatment that you had? Do you think you'd be sitting here saying that?
No, because I don't think I would ever have paid attention to it.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, I think I'm actually kind of glad that at 26 I had that experience rather than at 45.
I totally agree with you.
And I think we talk about this like all the fucking time. What's the masculine way in Punjabi culture to deal with stuff?
Yeah.
You drink.
I drink. Yeah.
There you go. And that makes absolutely no fucking sense at all. How is that seen as a masculine way to deal with problems?
But then that's why, you know, it's culturally accepted to drink and to drink to excess, and, you know, oh no, drink a bila, it's all right, you know, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about your problems. Have a drink. But remember what I said about intergenerational trauma. That's another thing that we inherit, that it's acceptable to have a drink to numb your feelings. Great, okay, that's wonderful. What if you keep doing that in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s? Keeps going.
It's just basically self-medicating, isn't it? And like then you get to a point where you're 45, and then like I feel like it like shoots off spores.
Yeah.
Then you have issues, and it's not the sole cause, but then you have issues like domestic violence pop up.
Spot on.
You know, like these weird relationships with the people around you, and it becomes a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
You're so right, because I would love to know I say I'd love to know. This makes me sound relatively sadistic, but I'd love to know how many people actually die from alcoholism, because it's all very well saying, okay, they've had liver failure. So how would their, on their, this is really morbid, but on their death certificate would be liver failure or heart disease or heart attack, or how many of those could be linked to the drinking? And you know, if we were to look at in our community, especially the Punjabi community, I say Punjabi community because there's a social kind of acceptance of drinking. But like you said, domestic violence, you know, that's massive.
Yeah.
And then women, I remember treating a woman who came into the rehab for about 3 weeks. Punjabi, suit, everything. I saw the husband, the turban, and I'm not even joking. Inside, I was like, yes, things are turning. She didn't last. And this is a woman who came in young, had a child. Her eyes were as yellow as could be. You know, she was jaundiced because of her level of drinking. But there was nothing to say to me that she had any support outside. Nobody understood.
Yeah.
And she didn't do the 6 months. I mean, she didn't even last the month, you know. But
I feel like with education and stuff, I think that will improve.
yeah, it's still hard though. It's still really hard. I totally agree. I think it will improve, perhaps with the following generation.
Yeah, and I think that's part of. I think that's why people who talk about it, like yourself, other people, that I feel like that's what's so important, because I always think, yes, of course, it's like an internal thing. Like somebody has to be like, okay, I want help, but I feel like the more material that's available to be like, no, look, we can actually, like, we've got a plan.
Yeah.
This is how you can treat it. Like, this isn't something that you're just stuck with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And it's accepted in our circles. So the South Asian circle, for example, that, oh, okay, this is specifically like these people empathize with me. They understand like my story. And I think that really helps.
Yeah.
Rather than going to, it's weird because I don't want to sound divisive, but going to like an outsider.
Yeah.
Somebody who's not in our community doesn't understand the problems.
Yeah, but sometimes from what I've seen from people from the South Asian community who have to go outside, I've seen when they break free, they're more likely to be in recovery.
Right.
So my kind of, my way of working and what I've worked with is when someone comes into recovery means no more drinking on a day-to-day basis, you know, but that means forever. It's abstinence.
Right.
I know there's a lot about harm minimization. Personally, I don't agree with it because I think you picked up, the first one does the damage.
Right.
Picked up, you know, and that's. I know that sounds really extreme, but for someone who's an alcoholic and someone who has had severe consequences, whether it's health, whether it's social, psychological, that would be recovery, and then you have to learn to not self-medicate with a substance.
Right.
And I think that's really hard. I think that's really hard for the Punjabi community. And like I was saying earlier, that I find that when they go outside of the community, it's almost like there's more acceptance.
Right.
You know, and that's what I've seen. I wish it wasn't so much like that.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Obviously, like anonymous and all that, but what are some of the most severe cases of addiction that you've seen?
Oh my goodness.
Because I feel like that's another point, because I don't think people understand, like, people around them's relationship with, let's say, booze, gambling, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand that, oh, okay, this is addiction.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for some of the most severe cases that I've seen, I'm talking about somebody who's in their, like, young 40s, 30s, who is needing a liver transplant. And I mean, I remember a woman who came into the office, said, I don't feel right. She was someone who was really ill. I'm talking yellow from top to, like Marge Simpson, completely yellow. within seconds, I kind of looked at her. I said, "You need to get." I knew she was going to be sick. She wasn't sick. What happened? You have like varices in your throat. They burst, and she just projectile vomited blood, pure blood, all the way out. And I thought, my God, she's going to die. She's going to die. I think now she got recovery to the point that now she's in recovery. She got her transplant, and oh my God, I saw her the other day. I was like, "You are glowing." She goes, "Oh, that means a lot." She nearly died. But I've also seen the other side to it where, for example, I mentioned like sex and love addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a woman who came into treatment, and she, again, very, very yellow, 2 beautiful daughters, and got some level of recovery, got into a relationship with someone in treatment because she was constantly getting into relationships, filling the void, and ended up in hospital, and she died. And I tell you something, for me,
what did she
she
die of?
picked up alcohol. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. It's like I'm expecting you to mind me. Sorry.
That's fine.
But she started drinking. She started drinking because her relationship started going up and down. But really, the relationship was just to fill the void.
Right.
And she died, and she was really, and I will never forget being at her funeral and just seeing her daughters, and I that was really powerful for me.
Harsh. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I think the hardest thing about seeing someone who's really ill is when they don't see it.
Yeah.
When they don't see it, and they're going to die. We need to mention that D word to those people.
Yeah.
But those are probably the hardest ones.
That's crazy. Gambling addiction is always one that's fascinated me.
Yeah.
Like, because I've never really, I don't think I've ever suffered from any form of addiction, really.
You said really. You're questioning that.
I
we need to have a session on the
I like food and a couple of other things.
Listen, we've all got our vices. Okay?
Yes.
We've all got our vices. There is not a single person that can tell me in this room that we don't have our vices. It's just when we got consequences from
it. Was like one of the craziest addiction stories I've heard. Have you heard of Terry Crews?
Terry Crews?
Yeah, so he's a actor. He was in White Chicks, Everybody Hates Chris, the Old Spice commercials. He's really famous. You would know him by face.
If I saw his face,
go on, pal. Get a picture up.
And what was his addiction?
You'll never guess it. Porn. A famous, good-looking, huge dude was addicted to porn.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And he was this. Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God! Yes, he's the one who got. He's the one who there was some issues with. What's that guy? This is when my brain's going prego brain. He's. Oh my God! What is the name of that guy in Hollywood who's been taken to court now?
Oh, Weinstein.
Weinstein.
No, so it wasn't Weinstein, but he was in the Me Too stuff. So
he
it was a different.
In the Me Too stuff.
No. So he got sexually assaulted
by somebody else.
By a producer, a famous.
Take that back, Weinstein.
Agent. Oh, fuck Weinstein. I guarantee you he's at some point sexually assaulted Terry Crews, right?
Fine.
That motherfucker's done everything.
Yeah.
That dude is the devil.
He really has. He looks it as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, did you see that? We're off on a tangent, but did you see that him turning up to his court hearings?
Yeah, what's that about?
He was all trying to I'm a frail old man.
Trying to get and that's publicity.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
if you're
going like that, then let's hope everything is all kind of shriveled up.
But Terry Crews, a huge. I think he's a 6'3", a fucking huge wedge guy. Some Hollywood agent grabbed his cock.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew he was sexually assaulted. I thought it was Weinstein. I didn't realize it wasn't. I just want everything to be Weinstein.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you can fling any shit and some of it will stick at that prick. There was him. He was addicted to porn. And he was describing his addiction, where I was like, "Oh my God!"
So how was he describing his addiction, and why did that shock you?
Because I'm fairly sure one of my friends is actually addicted to porn. No, genuinely, and I won't say his name, but honestly, we have conversations about it, and he straight up says it. He's just I almost prefer porn to sex. And I was like,
So what? Okay,
but what? But Terry Crews.
Terry Crews said this.
No,
I'm kidding.
So Terry Crews, he was talking about how he'd be driving along on the motorway
And need to stop.
and he wouldn't stop.
Oh wow.
He said he'd be watching porn and driving. Not even like masturbate, but his like masturbation like totals went up and shit. He was describing, and he was like, it was actually quite a dark period of my life.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's such it's something I'd crack jokes about, like, you know, porn addictions. But he was like, no, it like really led me down this path where
it's dark. And so for you, was it the shock that it was someone high profile, and also, like, I get from you is that porn can be an addiction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was those two things exactly.
Yeah.
That's somebody who's like,
you know, this is what I'm saying. Anything that takes you outside of yourself, you know, I don't want you to go away and be thinking like, oh my God, like, you know, people can be addicted to all kinds of things, you know, smoking, coffee, whatever. But there are some addictions that will take you, like he's saying, right? Take you down a really dark path.
Yeah.
And just, it's when you take yourself outside of yourself. You know, what is it about us that's not enough? That's what we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's just a vice, you know, I'm so big on that now. Where I am in my life now is just, you know, I want to kind of bang that drum to say to everybody, look, guys, you know, open up your hearts and your minds to be aware of yourself. And I hate to say the cliche, don't hate me, don't judge me, but love yourself, because no one's going to do that for you. And that's not even a bad thing. We have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, but when we get to things like addiction, you know, you need some serious recovery from that.
How can you, I mean, there's probably people watching or listening.
Yeah.
How can you help somebody who you can recognize is maybe not even addicted, but has these weird relationships with things like alcohol, smoking? Yeah, smoking, everybody knows, just like smoking, you're just killing yourself, isn't it? But like addiction.
But we still do it.
Yeah, I know, it's fucking crazy.
We still do it.
But yeah, how can you help somebody in that situation?
That's a really good question. Like, so I'm going to ask that question to you, right? So I'm going to throw that back to you. Like, what do you see as help?
I think with help. So, for example, if I again think about my own situation, and I know it's not addiction, but anybody could have been saying anything to me at that time, like, look, man, there's something wrong, like, you know, you're not yourself, and I would have dismissed it. It was only when I came to that realization myself that then I could help, like, myself. So to me, helping another individual in a similar situation, in an addiction situation, is getting them to realize themselves rather than forcing something onto them.
There you go. That in a nutshell.
I'm just a smart fucking dude, Poonam, right?
And then you're going to say it's because I've got a psychology degree.
Yeah.
If I hear that again,
yeah, I'm always cheating.
If I hear that again, I'm like fucking smack someone in the head. I got a psychology degree, so I'm sorry, but no. On a level, the reason I asked you that is because sometimes when you have awareness, right, and that is no disrespect to anybody else who hasn't gone through counselling or therapy or some kind of self-work with someone else. But when you have that kind of knowledge, something's awoken within you to recognise, you know what? I need to be the one to change this.
Yeah.
I have to take responsibility. And if I don't take responsibility, no one else is going to do that for me. So, you know I've said this word so many times, like to the point that you go like my God, Poonam, if I hear that one more time, I'm just going to do something. But consequences.
Yeah.
I have to have enough consequences. Like, even when I had depression, I needed to reach my rock bottom to say, enough, Poonam, enough. Talk about it now. Let's talk about it.
Right.
So, but the difficulty with addiction, the difficulty, let's say, with someone who's got drug addiction, someone who's got alcohol addiction, or even gambling addiction, it's like they might lose their house and still think they don't have a problem. They will look. This is what my experience has told me. I have sat opposite somebody who is yellow, tip to toe, who I know will die if they walk through that door and they don't help. or they don't take the help, you know, or they've come to me, you know, full of self-harm scars, and they still think they can do it by themselves, you know.
Crazy.
So it's so important to, like, the shift in themselves. But that's not to say you have to do it all by yourself, because the people that I've definitely been part of their recovery, and I wouldn't be as arrogant to say, oh yeah, I help them get well. No, that's not my role. I help them to use their toolkit. I give them the tools, you know, as collectively as a team would, right? So it's so important to recognize it's got to come from within, and you've got to have the right support network. What's the point of saying, okay, well, you know what, I recognize I've got a problem. Let me go out with a group of friends who are going to drink. Let me go out with at the family party that I know everybody's going to be drinking. That doesn't become your support network. So it's making those shifts. What's supportive for me? What's nurturing for me? I love that word, nurturing. Like, I should get it tattooed somewhere. I have other tattoos. I need to get that tattoo. I love the word nurturing. We have to nurture ourselves. But for people who are suffering from addiction, like, nurturing doesn't come easy. You know, you don't know what kind of traumas have triggered off the addiction.
Yeah.
You know.
It's crazy. It's a murky world.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was.
Media.
Would you say social media is an addiction? That was the question.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness! Don't even get me started on social media. Like, and people's necks like this, and like all of this malarkey. Social media is probably one of the most dangerous addictions. New age modern addictions, I would say, because
I was reading
dangerous.
I was reading in the news that they're actually trying to pump a lot more money into the research around that.
Yes.
Because I think there was a spike in like teenage depression that they've correlated to
health.
social media.
Oh my gosh. Like, why? Because you're comparing your kind of internal things, and actually, I don't know how many of us, I've certainly done this in this room, can do that, but you compare your internal feelings to someone's externals. Bad move, right? Bad move. If you do that just socially, shit move. If you do that at your hand, like, that's always there, oh my goodness, problem. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
That is really shit. Comparing yourself.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. And did you know, like, getting likes on social media, it activates the serotonin in your brain.
Well, and how fucked up is that?
That's fucked. Yeah, I read that and I was like, that's ridiculous.
But you need a like, you know. So again, we are then working. The reason I said it's so dangerous, because you are now we are instilling a whole future generation with this kind of, you need something external to make you feel whole.
Yeah.
It just comes away. It makes me laugh, right? I'm on Instagram, okay? I have come away from Facebook, but I'm reintroducing it purely for mental wealth stuff.
Yeah.
But, and even that is because I was told by somebody that, you know, who does know what he's talking about. He's like, well, if you do it on that, you know, you'll generate more people coming to the site. And I was like, okay, all right, fine. So we'll do that. But I just think, how does that, we talk about mental health on the social media sites.
Yeah.
So ironic. But the reality is, like, social media actually deteriorates the mental health.
Yeah.
Like, it really does.
I can feel it. I like, definitely, like, you're like scrolling through social media and, like, you know, you're scrolling through and then you feel almost like you're a fucking zombie, don't you?
That is the word.
Yeah,
you
a
know,
social media zombie.
Honestly, like, my husband would kill me for saying this, but I have to say it, and he's just going to deny it anyway. But, like, the kids, like, I've got two little rugrats running around, right? And one of them was, like, about to jump off the sofa, and he's like this. I'm like, oh, mate, you sort the kids out. He's like, yeah, they're fine. No, one of them's going to, like, hurt himself. No, they're fine. But you're on your phone. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
It is.
To the point we don't even realise we're doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
I think people just. I think people's relationships with their phones is just fucked up. Have you ever seen like people who like my biggest pet peeve is when people go to like concerts or like shows or something, and the whole fucking show is on their story. I'm like, motherfucker, did you actually experience the event?
I agree with you.
And like when fucking Drake came to London, I didn't even have to pay tickets. I just watched like I just watched like 4 people's Instagram stories, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, I've got the show. That's fine.
You see? No, this is what I'm trying to say. It is becoming a culture. It is a culture.
Yeah.
So as much as we are trying to do things differently, you know, I heard, in fact, it was a client who said this to me. She said, our parents did some fucked up things that we're going to think, we're never going to do that stuff. But we are going to, in not doing those fucked up things, we're going to do a whole new set of fucked up things because of the world that we're living in now.
Yeah, I'm with you. You mentioned earlier, I think we've got to wrap up soon. I think it's coming up to time. You mentioned something earlier and about the person losing their home, the gambling from the gambling.
They lost everything, their business, their home, everything.
And you were talking about sex addictions as well.
Yeah.
Last week we filmed with V, the dominatrix.
Yeah.
So that episode's not out when we're filming. But she mentioned something where one of the girls that she used to work with convinced this guy to remortgage his house for financial domination.
Wow.
Imagine
hashtag
that.
Mind blown.
That is fucked up, isn't it? It's like the overlapping of 2 fucking addictions.
Absolutely.
This dude just remortgaged his house. Like, what are you doing?
Unbelievable. But you know, for some reason, he's filling his own void.
His void. That's it. He's filling his hole.
He's filling his hole.
Well, this has genuinely been fucking great.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have you back on. I feel like this could be like a little segment. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so
We'll just pick up a topic. Like, this was obviously the addiction episode. We'll just pick a fucking topic and have you back on.
Yeah, I will be happy to come back. And
awesome.
Thanks for having me.
We'll pop all of your links and stuff in the descriptions so people can check you out.
Yeah, amazing.
Awesome.
Keep doing the work you're doing.
Thank you. Poonam Sandhu.